Hello, today we're going to go over statement of cash flows. We're going to look at how to create the operating section of the cash flow statement. All right, so when we look, the first one we're going to look at cash collected from customers, because that's, a cash inflow and that's an operating piece. So in order to do that, we're going to look at the balance sheet account. And so when we collect money from customers, it comes through which account? The receivable, okay? And so what I teach the students is we're going to use the balance sheet accounts as kind of our control accounts to calculate the cash difference. So when I think about, well, what are the journal entries that affect the receivable? So let's go back to Module 3 and think of, when do we have accounts receivable in a journal transaction? I'll do open call out here. Anyone tell me?
You buy something when the customer comes in, you buy something on account.
Perfect. And so what would the debit be?
Debit would be to the accounts receivable.
And what would the credit be?
Credit would be to sales. Or
Yeah, it would be sales. So we're talking about buying on account, so you got it. So we got the receivable and we got sales. And then when we get cash from the customer, what's the journal entry? Debit cash and credit the receivable, right? So if you look here, there's the transaction you just said. So we have the receivable, we have sales, we have the cash, and then the accounts receivable, and that's when you receive cash. So when I'm creating the operating piece, I'm looking for cash collected from customers. And so what number in the T account gives me that? Well, we got to go to the transaction. We have debit to cash and credit accounts receivable. So whenever we have a credit to the receivable, that represents the cash collected from customers. And you can kind of see that on that piece here. So then when we have a sale, the sale impacts the receivable with a debit to the receivable. So there's sales made on account. So now, do we have enough information to calculate cash collected from customers? Do we have a beginning balance in the receivable?
yes.
Do we have an ending balance in the receivable?
Yes.
So we got yes here, yes here. Do we have a sales figure?
Yes.
Yes. So now we could calculate for the statement of cash flows, we can now calculate the cash collected from customers. So now I'm just using my statement. Make sure you're looking at the right column. So this is the beginning balance. This is the ending balance. So the beginning balance on January 1 was what?
190,000.
Yep, 190,000. What was my ending balance? 110. And then what was my sales figure? 900. So this is why we want to teach them the T accounts, because now when we get to this part, we're going to use the T account approach to kind of calculate and create the statement of cash flow. We could use the formulas. If you scroll down here, you could see the formulas. We could do that, but you're memorizing a lot of different things there. Like Allison said, remember when she went over the 3 in Module 4, I think you kind of showed us that. It's a lot easier just to say, hey, we're looking at cash collected from customers. That's the receivable account. What transactions impact the receivable account? And more importantly, what is the cash transaction to the receivable? Well, it's a debit to cash, credit to the receivable, so thereby we're solving for this variable. So now when we solve this, there's a couple different ways we could do this. We could look at the difference here. So we have Allison, what did you say before?
I just look at, there was a decrease of $80,000, and so then I know I have to add it to this. That means this number had to be bigger. So I don't mess around with this plus this minus this equals that, or this plus this minus this equals that. That's too much for me to think about. It's just like, okay, it changed by $80,000, so I just got to add that here, and I know this is 980. That's how I do it.
Now, I've always done it this way, but after I had Allison explain that, I kind of like Allison's way, but I'll show you another way of doing it just so you have multiple perspectives. You could just make it an algebra equation. 190 plus 900 minus the right side gives you that. You could do that if you want to be consistent, so it looks something like this.
And this is what kids will be used to, but that just takes too much time for me.
Yeah.
So this is why let's change by $80,000, so just
Yeah.
add that onto the sales and we're good to go.
Yeah, so I kind of like that approach. So you're up by 80, went down by 80, so therefore it has to be bigger than that number, 980. I think that's a lot slicker. I'm glad I trained with Allison because she's always teaching me new things. All right, so there's the end of that. So now